American Vampire Volume 3 Part 2, Survival of the Fittest, written by Scott Snyder, art by Sean Murphy. Alright, Volume 3 Part 2, Survival of the Fittest. This video will cover the Survival of the Fittest miniseries. The main characters we're going to be following are Felicia Book, vassals of the Morning Star or agent, daughter of James and Abelina Book. Then we're going to be following Cash McCogan. Now, if you remember Cash McCogan, he was in the Volume 2 story arc in Las Vegas. He was the chief of police there. He had some sort of investigation with some vampires. He learned that his dad was a Gaelic prime vampire. And then he had a run-in with Skinner Sweet, and Skinner Sweet infected Cash's wife's unborn child in her belly. And that baby was born, and Cash's wife died. Well, we're going to see where Cash's life is now in this volume, how he hooks up with Felicia once again, and we're going to see what draws them on this adventure to investigate some going-ons in this castle in Romania, where we're going to have some Nazis and some vampires coming into the story. This one is going to be really fun. Let's dive into it. Survival of the Fittest. Survival of the Fittest, Issue 1. This story arc starts off in 1941 in New York City. The previous story arc, Ghost War, took place in 1943, so chronologically this is slightly before the last story arc, but we are for the most part following different characters. We see Felicia Book, now 29 years old. She is the daughter of James and Abelina Book. Her dad, James, was an American vampire. This would therefore make Felicia half vampire. She has some vampire blood in her. This is something she is not happy about. She hates vampires, and she hates that part of her is a vampire. She works for a group called the Vassals of the Morning Star, dedicated to hunting vampires. Felicia, she is talking with a Mr. Harding. Mr. Harding is the owner of a newspaper called The Clarion, and Felicia is telling him that she works for the Vassals of the Morning Star, otherwise known as the VMS, a group that hunts vampires, and she is warning the owner that his news organization is infested with them. There are at least 16 vampires embedded within his organization. Mr. Harding doesn't believe it, says that she has no facts, no proof, and he's getting angry with her and tells her to skedaddle. Felicia informs the man that her organization, the VMS, is going to be cleaning the newspaper's ranks one way or the other. What she is offering is a chance for him to be a part of that cleanup rather than it just being forced upon him. Mr. Harding calls a man into his office named Gil, and he tells Gil to go grab security and escort this Felicia woman out of here. Felicia, she points a gun at this Gil and accuses him of being a vampire. And Mr. Harding, he doesn't believe this. He says, Gil has been by my side and been my friend for nearly 15 years working at this newspaper. It's ridiculous for her to consider him a vampire. And Felicia says, he is a friend you unknowingly let manipulate you and your paper, and he often sways you what stories get on the front page and what gets buried at the back. Mr. Harding argues it's his job as the city manager at the paper, and Gil chimes in, it's what I'm trained to do. And Felicia says, yes, it is, but not by Mr. Harding here, by your real bosses, your blood-sucking masters. Mr. Harding, the Pulp House fire last month, did you wonder why Gil here was so slow to send someone to cover it? And Harding says he apologized, and Gil says it was a simple mistake. Felicia says, I'm sure he did apologize. How about for all the bodies in the sewers? Did he apologize for that? He's playing you, using your newspaper to cover the tracks of his real bosses. This Gil, he's not going to take this anymore. He says, listen to yourself, miss, please. There's no evidence that could possibly support this delusion of yours. And Felicia replies, I don't need evidence. I can smell you. Do you want empirical evidence? Exhibit A, and she blasts this Gil in his chest. She fired at him with a wooden bullet, and he hisses at her and turns into his vampire form. Mr. Harding is freaking out that his friend of 15 years, Gil, is now a vampire, and Gil, he starts lunging towards Felicia, and he says, "You think you can come here and kill me, bitch? Do you know how long I've walked the earth? How many decades I've preyed on the warm, sweet-blooded? Over 400 years, little girl, I've seen empires fall." And Felicia replies, "Put it in the obit." And she shoots Gil in his head, and Gil, dying, senses Felicia's vampire blood within her and calls her a traitor to her kind. And she says, "You're not my kind, asshole." As she leaves, she informs Mr. Harding that the body will deteriorate in a few minutes. So we are establishing here that Felicia is now a badass in the Vassals of the Morning Star. In fact, she's taken down 53 targets in less than 2 years. Felicia, she heads over to the American Museum of Natural History. She passes by various exhibits and takes a secret elevator down below where we see is the home of the hidden East Coast headquarters of the Vassals of the Morning Star, below the American Museum of Natural History. Felicia, she grew up here. She played hide-and-go-seek behind bookcases and vampire skeletons while her mom was working here. It feels like home to her. As Felicia passes through the halls, some women see her and they are in awe of her. Felicia, she enters a room where we see a Lyndon Hobbs, leader of the Vassals of the Morning Star, is briefing 2 junior agents. Felicia, she wants to talk with Lyndon alone, so the 2 junior agents leave, and Felicia and Hobbs discuss various VMS business, and how Skinner Sweet was spotted in Portland a while back, but he hasn't been seen since. Lyndon eventually turns the conversation towards an agent, Cash McCogan. That's right, Cash McCogan, whom we met in Volume 2, has joined up with the Vassals of the Morning Star. Cash is further downstairs in the VMS headquarters there. He is with his son, named after his father, Gus McCogan, and we see little Gus is in a cage. Gus is now about 5 years old and looks very bestial. He is permanently in a transformed state. Black skin, yellow eyes, he looks like a monster and is completely feral, incapable of growing mentally, and appears to be in a near constant state of hunger. Little Gus is this way because back in Volume 2, when he was in his mother's womb, he was infected by a syringe by Skinner Sweet, and something about being infected that way in utero has caused the child to come out this way. Cash, he feels sorry for his son, and he feeds him a live rabbit which little Gus devours. Back to Lyndon and Felicia. They've discussed Cash and his son and the predicaments there. Hobbs and the VMS are trying to find a way to cure the child. Hobbs briefs Felicia on a mission he would like her to take on. There is a man named Dr. Eric Pavel. He is a Romanian botanist working out of a castle in Romania, Castle Vlan. He's the world's expert on plant-produced photoreactive compounds. In other words, organic substances that react strongly to the sun. And the rumor is that he may have found a cure of some sort, something which when ingested by someone exposed to certain frequencies of light might cause radical changes in the nature of that person's blood. Hobbs sent a VMS agent, Agent Mayer, to that castle recently to check it out. Agent Mayer was posing as a German investor, but the German forces then occupied the castle, and Mayer's fate is a mystery to the VMS. But before Mayer went off the grid, he managed to get one message back to VMS headquarters. And that message was, "Rumors are true. Pavel has found it. Must move fast." In light of these recent events, Lyndon wants Felicia to look into it. He says that she is hands down the best agent they have. Her ability to track targets, to sense aberrations in the blood, make her priceless to the organization. He's sending a team to investigate in 4 days from now, and he wants her to be on that team. He says, our agents have already been sold to the German forces occupying Castle Vran as wealthy American sympathizers looking to invest in the future of the Reich. Once inside the castle, you'll conduct your own secret investigation, see if there's any truth to the claims about Pavel. Felicia asks, what claims? What is it you think this Pavel guy has found? Just then, Cash McCogan walks upstairs and joins them. He tells Felicia that Lyndon is talking about the cure for vampirism, and we're going to get it. Issue 2. Pearl and Cash are in a plane on their way to Romania to investigate this Eric Pavel and his supposed vampire cure. They are gonna be undercover, so they have to get their cover story straight. Felicia starts going over it. She says, alright, our story. I'm Felicia Donato, heiress to the Italian-American family-owned New York, England waterworks. And you're Cashel O'Donnell of O'Donnell Oil in South Texas. We're sympathizers to the Reich, here to invest in whatever contraption will help the Nazis' cause. We barely know each other, met in an underground meeting of the American SS chapter. Sound good? Cash says, sounds good. Now as they're flying on their way to this Romanian castle, their plane starts getting shot at. Felicia and Cash are wondering why. They were given landing codes for safe entry, but the pilot says the landing codes must have been faulty. So their plane is taking gunfire. The pilot, he gets shot, and Cash is forced to take over the plane and make an emergency landing. Cash, struggling, somehow manages to land the plane safely on this snowy cliff, just shy of falling over the edge of that cliff. Cash and Felicia breathe a sigh of relief. They are alive. As they open the plane door and they step outside, they see they are surrounded by Nazis. The head Nazi there asks them, "Good morning, would you be so kind as to explain yourself?" Felicia, she is ready to start shooting. She does not trust the situation, but Cash tells her to play it cool, stick to their cover story. Cash, he begins yelling at the Nazis, trying to turn the tables back on them. He says, "We fly here on our own dime, money ready to contribute to your cause, support your interest, and you try and shoot us out of the goddamn sky?" The Nazi replies, "Your landing code." Cash continues, "I don't give a goddamn about a landing code. You gave our pilot a bad code. That's egg on your Fuhrer's mustache. You know how terrified this little miss was? Hell, I'll say it, how terrified I was. I'll tell you what, we're just about ready to jump ship on you fellas. In fact, if this is how you treat your own people, I'm about ready to give my greenbacks to the Allies. Now either apologize and take us to see Dr. Pavel's work, or we start getting real patriotic real fast." The Nazis, they discuss amongst themselves and they decide to apologize. The main Nazi man here introduces himself. He says his name is Colonel Werner Heitmeyer, and his assistant here is a Lieutenant Franz Munitz, and they are in charge of overseeing Dr. Pavel's exciting research here. They wish to make amends to Cash and Felicia for shooting their plane out of the sky. They invite them over to the Castle Vlan. Cash and Felicia get driven in the Nazis' convertible, with the Nazi army tanks and vehicles leading the way up a snowy, windy road. Cash and Felicia are then led inside the castle. They are quickly introduced to Dr. Eric Pavel himself, the man who supposedly may have the vampire cure. Dr. Pavel shakes Cash's hand, and Pavel says he is happy to see them. Perhaps they could go for a walk around the grounds. The Nazi, Werner Heitmeyer, tells Dr. Pavel, "Our guests must be exhausted. Let's allow them to freshen up before the presentation. Have you made sure everything is in order, Doctor?" Dr. Pavel says, "No, I mean yes." Heitmeyer adds, "Perhaps you should check again." Dr. Pavel leaves, and Cash and Felicia wonder what this presentation is all about. Werner Heitmeyer explains that they would like to present to Cash and Felicia a full demonstration of Dr. Pavel's newest and most impressive innovations later this evening. Felicia and Cash make their way up to their room they will be staying in the castle. Now that they're alone, Cash tells Felicia that when Dr. Pavel shook his hand, Pavel slipped him a note, and the note reads, "We must leave tonight before the presentation, or we will never leave." Felicia comments, "Well, guess this will be a short trip, and there was so much I wanted to see in Romania." Felicia and Cash, they got dressed in their bedroom. They put on some fancy clothes for the presentation. They conceal their hidden guns. Cash helps Felicia tie up the back of her dress. Felicia shares with Cash that she's been having nightmares about Skinner Suite. They both discuss how they are excited about the possibility of a vampire cure. Eventually, their conversation moves over to discussing Skinner Suite and the night that he injected Cash's wife, Lily, with the bloody syringe and how it killed Lily and deformed their son, Gus. Felicia says she is so sorry about how that all went down, and Cash says there's no need to talk about it. We both did what we thought was right at the time. Now let's get down there and rescue us a doctor. Cash and Felicia, they head downstairs to Dr. Pavel's laboratory/showroom. There are some Nazis around. They discreetly try to talk to Dr. Pavel and try to take him up on his offer of going for a walk around the grounds like he suggested earlier but wasn't able to carry through. But Dr. Pavel seems a little bit nervous. He says, "Oh, no, I'm afraid our stroll will have to wait until tomorrow at the soonest. You see, we just had a group of new guests arrive earlier than expected." And Werner Heitmeyer enters the lab and says, "That's right, Doctor. I invited the 77th Brigade. It's a new division. They are interested in Dr. Pavel's work." And we see this 77th Brigade in the room, and they encompass the entirety of this showroom, and they are all Nazi vampires. Issue 3. So we no longer only have Nazis, we now have Nazi vampires in the mix. Werner Heitmeyer is explaining to Felicia and Cash that vampires are indeed real, and Felicia asks, what is the Reich doing in bed with the Denzians of Hell? How does this further the cause? Werner Heitmeyer says, no matter how noble, how heroic our quest, the fight itself is full of misery. You endure what you must to reach your goal. In fact, it is a goal we share with our undead friends here. Werner introduces them to the vampire Captain Clementine, the leader of the 77th Brigade of Nazi vampires. Werner says to the captain, "Isn't that right, Captain Clementine?" And Clementine replies, "Yes, it is the goal of evolutionary actualization." Werner explains further that these vampires believe they are the dominant species. They are dedicated to the fulfillment of Darwinian law. Just as the Aryan race should rule humanity, so too should their vampire friends here rule the world of the undead. And doesn't hurt that these vampires also have very deep pockets. And while their stock is not ours, their cause not ours, their money serves the Reich well. And in return, business for them will be good when the Reich's empire is realized. Werner says that the Nazis have already began incorporating the vampires into their fighting ranks, and the vampires have proved quite useful. Felicia, she is not liking this at all, but Cash is trying to keep her calm, whispers for her to hold it together. Cash and Felicia, they take their seats. They are going to watch Dr. Pavel's demonstration, and they sit in the audience with the rest of the Nazis and the Nazi vampires. Dr. Pavel begins the presentation. He explains how ultraviolet rays affect different species of vampires differently. The Carpathians are weak to all kinds of light, but other vampire species, older ones, are less affected by light. Dr. Pavel then asks for a volunteer, and he calls up Cash and Felicia. He wants them to come test out a new device of his. It is some sort of weapon that uses electrified helium gas to create focused beams of light amplified within the gun itself that can be fired outwards. Dr. Pavel, he has a blanket covering a cage. he removes the blanket to reveal a young Balkan species of vampire in the cage, similar in appearance to the Carpathians. Dr. Pavel wants Cash to fire this light weapon to test it out. Cash, he gladly does so. He holds the light weapon that the doctor created and vaporizes the little Balkan vampire. Captain Clementine, watching in the audience, is impressed. Then Dr. Pavel reveals a different vampire species in another cage. This one is a Bavarian vampire species. Cash, he vaporizes that one as well with the gun. Lastly is a Gaelic species. This particular species looks similar to Cash's child, Gus, back home. Cash, he grows sad. He doesn't want to fire on this vampire, and he freezes. Can't do it. Felicia, sensing this hesitation from Cash, takes over for him. She says, "Oh, give a girl a chance, will ya?" She grabs the light weapon and vaporizes the last vampire in his cage. The vampires all in attendance all cheer. Werner Heitmeyer jests, "You certainly are an American woman." Cash, he's still frozen. Well, that concludes the presentation, and everyone seems impressed, and it was a success. Werner Heitmeyer wants to wine and dine Cash and Felicia some more, introduce them around, but Felicia says they need some rest. They've been in a plane crash and just learned about the existence of the undead and tested out a solar weapon. They're tired. Werner Heitmeyer says, of course, rest. Cash and Felicia go back to their bedroom, and they discuss what to do next. They worry their cover will be blown soon, and Cash says that he's done playing dress-up. It's time for action. Felicia rappels out of their window down the castle tower. Both of them sneak around downstairs, and they make their way to Dr. Pavel. They find him. Cash says to Dr. Pavel that they have come here to get him and get his research out of here. Dr. Pavel, realizing that they are friends, tells them to come quickly. He leads them down a windy staircase, down a secret passageway to some caverns that apparently the Nazis haven't discovered yet. They get into a small boat and row down these caverns, which are filled with water and lit by a phosphorescent algae at the bottom. Cash asks where these caverns will spit them out to get out of here, and Dr. Pavel says, "Oh no, the caverns are completely enclosed, there's no way out of here." And Cash says, "Well then what the hell are we doing then?" And Dr. Pavel answers, "Arming ourselves." He shows them some huge vampire species down there. They appear like these gigantic statues. And Dr. Pavel says, "Behold, the oldest, most powerful vampires in the world, and we're going to wake them up." Issue 4, Dr. Pavel explains his path to finding these ancient vampires. Many years ago in 1915, Eric Pavel was hired by a Sir Herbert Barths, whom was the curator of a British museum, and was also secretly a Carpathian vampire. This Sir Herbert Barths asked Dr. Pavel to consult on this old statue in the Egyptian wing of the museum he worked at. Dr. Pavel was brought to this statue, and it was ginormous. A window shined a light on the shoulder of the statue. The statue apparently was a tribute to some previously unknown god of the afterlife. Dr. Pavel asked what any of this has to do with him. After all, he's just a botanist. Sir Herbert Barths directed Dr. Pavel's attention to the shoulder of the statue, to initially what looked like a mold or fungus growing on the statue's shoulder. Well, Barths says that every night we scrape this material off the shoulder, and every morning it's back, and we can't figure out what it is. Dr. Pavel told Barths that the substance is clearly some sort of photoreactant, reacting to the sun's light coming in from the skylight there. Dr. Pavel, he studied the supposed mold that was scraped off the statue. He discovered that it wasn't plant-based, it was scar tissue, scabbing of some sort. So the statue wasn't really a statue, it was alive. The sun was damaging its epidermis, creating a reoccurring wound. Dr. Pavel brought his findings to Sir Herbert Barths, and Barths seemed skeptical, but he said he would bring in a team of biologists to look at it. That night, Dr. Pavel, he was ecstatic about this discovery. A new life form reacting to the sun. How exciting! The next morning, Dr. Pavel returned to the Egyptian wing of the museum, only to see the statue being torn down. Barth said that the statue was a fraud and had to be destroyed immediately. Dr. Pavel was furious. Deep down in his soul, he knew the truth. He knew that that figure he had examined had been alive, vibrantly, strangely so. And that was when he realized, in more ways than one, that the creatures your parents tell you about at bedtime, monsters wondrous and terrible both, do in fact walk the earth. From that day forward, Dr. Pavel dedicated his life to finding more of these creatures and trying to protect them and nurture them back to life. He traveled long and far following rumors all around the world, but he was always too late. The creatures had always been destroyed by their own brethren, the Carpathian vampires. He theorized as a form of secret genocide. Until finally, one day he found the 3 specimens intact in Castle Vlan here in Romania. He hid their existence from the betrayers of their race, those Carpathians that sought to destroy the ancient vampires, as the ancient vampires are more powerful than them. Felicia, hearing this whole long story, asks, "What does any of this have to do with finding a cure for vampirism?" And Dr. Pavel explains, "Don't you see? They are the cure for your vampires. I have kept them here, cared for them with my own extracts, and now they are almost ready to wake." Felicia grows angry about this, but Cash tells her to just forget it. The doc's gone native, nothing to do about it. Let's call this thing a goose chase and get out of Dodge. The doctor explains, "Don't you see though? Just like in the botanical world, there are productive plants and there are weeds. The creatures that stand before you here, they are the great redwoods. And the creatures above us, those pale, parasitic monsters, they are like weeds. There is no use for them. All they do is choke out beauty, infect and kill. Weeds." Now I believe that Felicia, Cash, and Dr. Pavel were so enthralled by that flashback, they somehow didn't hear a battalion of Nazi vampires sneak up on them all the way through the secret caverns. Because Werner Heitmeyer, now there, says, Now, doctor, it's not very polite to insult your guests, is it?" Captain Clementine hisses in agreement. Werner Heitmeyer seems to know everything all along. He knew that Felicia and Cash were not who they said they were, and they were secretly working for the vassals of the Morning Star. And now he wants to question them some more and find out more about their organization. And they also knew that Dr. Pavel was hiding these ancient vampires, but they didn't know the location of them, so that is why they were secretly following him. Felicia and Cash, they try to make a run forward and fight back, but they get knocked out. When they eventually come through later, they are in a room alone, chained to the castle walls. Cash, he is talking with Felicia. He has a heart-to-heart talk with her. He tells her that they probably aren't going to make it out of here. They're going to fight back, of course, but they're probably not going to make it. They're outnumbered. He wants her to know, though, that vampire part of her, the part that she resents, he wants her to know that it doesn't make her damaged goods. It's not true. And Felicia to this says, "How can you say that? Just look at your child, Gus." And Cash continues, "It's not the good or bad of the blood I want to cure in Gus. It's what the stuff did to him, froze him in time. I don't want to cure him because I think he's evil. I want to cure him just because he's stuck, with no chance of growing into the man he's supposed to be. That man might be good, might be bad, I don't know, but that blood won't determine it. His choices will, just like with you. Look, what I'm saying is, if Gus always had the blood in him, and he grew up to be like you, I'd always be the proudest father in the room." Just then they hear a knock at the door. Some Nazis enter the room. There are 6 of them, 1 human, and 5 Nazi vampires. They drag with them Dr. Pavel and throw him onto the floor. He's all bloody and beaten up. The 5 vampires won a draw, and they are here to feast on Cash and Felicia. Now, the human Nazi in the room, though, is actually the vassals of the Morningstar agent, Agent Meyer, the agent who was sent here ahead of them and supposedly went missing. Well, he has secretly been working undercover as a Nazi soldier for quite a while now. He pulls out Dr. Pavel's light gun and he begins firing it, killing the 5 Carpathian Nazi vampires in the room. He then frees Cash and Felicia and helps Dr. Pavel up and tells them that they must hurry. He explains who he is. He says that he was working undercover here investigating Pavel's research when one day Werner Heitmeyer showed up with his own forces, and it caused Agent Meyer to be trapped here, waiting for a chance to make an escape. Well, he removes his Nazi insignia sleeve on his arm and he equips them all with Dr. Pavel's light guns, and they get ready to start blasting their way out of here. Some Nazi vampires pile into the room, and the 4 of them begin firing. They kill a whole bunch of these Carpathian Nazi vampires. But one of those vampires manages to kill Agent Meyer and decapitate him. So this Agent Meyer wasn't really around for that long, just enough to save them and then die. So now it is just Cash, Felicia, and Dr. Pavel now. More Nazi vampires are piling into the room. Dr. Pavel tells Cash and Felicia to escape out this back door. He gives Felicia a vial of something and tells her, "Take this, it's what you came for. Now leave me, this is my fight." He closes the door on them, and then Dr. Pavel shines his light gun into this contraption on the floor. He dies in the blast, but the light gun manages to engulf the entire room in ultraviolet light, and it kills all the many vampires in this room. Cash and Felicia continue running. They are outside now. They hop aboard a nearby motorcycle and prepare to try and drive out of here. Felicia tells Cash that Pavel gave her something. Cash says, "The cure. Yeah, I know. He told me about it when you were unconscious. Keep it safe." So I guess while Felicia was knocked out, Cash and Dr. Pavel were awake, and they were able to have a conversation where Dr. Pavel told Cash a little bit about this cure. They start speeding off. They don't get that far though. They drive a little bit, avoiding some gunfire, but they crash, hitting some sort of sewer system sticking out of the ground nearby. Now Werner Heitmeyer, he is there outside. He sees them, and he strolls over to them, confident he has the upper hand on them. He says, "It seems we have underestimated you, my American friends. Just a little bit, though." All of a sudden, though, there is a loud rumbling noise, so loud it vibrates the ground and the earth is shaking. The ancient vampires below have awoken, and they are moving and climbing up the cliffside that the castle sits on. And these ancient vampires seem prepared to confront these Nazis. Issue 5. The ancient vampires have knocked out the bridge that Cash and Felicia were going to use to escape. Cash and Felicia are wondering how they are going to get out of here now. How are they going to get to their extraction point? The ancient vampires actually speak a little bit, but it is in an ancient old language, so none of them really know what they are saying. The ancient vampires then begin attacking the Nazis, and Cash and Felicia get back on their motorcycle and figure that now is a good time to try and get out of here. Cash, he starts gunning it on the bike, putting it as fast as he can go. He's going to try and jump the gap in the bridge that is there now. So he's driving as fast as he can, and he manages to drive off the bridge in a particular way where the bridge forms a kind of ramp, and he gets some serious air off that bridge. And as we see the motorcycle soaring in the air, we see the ancient vampires swinging at the Nazis down below. Cash and Felicia manage to land on the other side of the bridge. They have made it. They continue driving. They are trying to get to their extraction point. So they're driving. They get to the top of this snowy hill. There's no more road. And we see the Nazis are on their tail now. Felicia, she pulls out the light gun and she begins to use it to melt the snow in front of them, clearing their path. So they drive down through the hill of snow, melting the snow in front of them as they go. As they are driving, Cash tells Felicia that the compound the doctor gave her is photoreactive, so you gotta inject it and then expose yourself to sunlight. It takes a week, but Dr. Pavel said it should work on most species and cure them of vampirism. So the two of them are still riding their motorcycle away. The Nazis in their tanks and other vehicles are chasing them. They want to deal with Cash and Felicia first before returning to deal with the ancient vampires. Although the Nazis, they are worried a little bit about the steepness of these snowy hills. Cash and Felicia round a nearby bend. They are now at their extraction point, which is a blimp airship. The airship is still a little bit too far away though. Felicia says we need more time. Cash tells Felicia to climb down the cliffside. Maybe they'll think we went over. He tells her to go. Felicia, she starts climbing down. But Cash, he informs Felicia that he's staying. He's gonna hold the Nazis back while she gets away. He tells her, you get Gus his medicine. Take care of him for me. Take him for a walk in the sun, will ya? Felicia asks the sun, Cash, what are you talking about? Get down here, they're coming. And Cash continues, someone has to hold them off. Go on. Felicia says, no, Cash, and Cash kisses her. And then he starts walking away. He tells her, remember what I told you, Felicia, back in that hellhole, about thinking you're damaged goods because of the vamp blood in you? You're anything but. Then Cash looks at the nearby Nazi tanks and he says, now it's time for the Yanks to enter the war. Cash begins running at the Nazi zombies. He throws some grenades at them. He uses the light gun to kill some more. He kills a whole bunch of these vampires. He runs on top of one of the nearby tanks and it opens its hatch, and a vampire pops out and begins chomping and biting Cash. Cash, in his last moments of life, manages to drop some grenades into that tank, and it explodes before he dies. Felicia, she is still hanging on the side of that cliff and she yells, Cash, no! As finally, the VMS airship comes into range and a VMS agent hanging in the air from a rope connected to the airship grabs Felicia and they make their escape. Felicia in the airship, now safe. She is saddened that Cash didn't make it out with her. 2 weeks later, back in New York City, Felicia is in her apartment, and she is visited by Lyndon Hobbs, and they debrief on the mission. And Hobbs tells her that the ancient vampires are nowhere to be found. Hobbs apologizes that the rumors of the cure seem to be untrue. Hobbs informs Felicia that Cash's son, Gus, is missing, and the VMS is launching a full investigation to find the kid. But he wants to let her know that they won't be coming here to her place as part of that investigation. He told the investigators that there is no reason to suspect her. No one is more dedicated to the cause than her. She tells Hobbs that he didn't have to do that, and Hobbs replies, I suppose this is how I say I'm sorry, Felicia. Hobbs leaves Felicia's apartment. Felicia has indeed taken Cash's son, Gus, and she is going to raise him as her own. I believe that Hobbs actually knows that Felicia has Cash's son and is caring for him, but he is going to let that slide because he is sorry that Cash is dead, and he knows that Felicia is dedicated to the cause and wants to give her this. Let her at least raise Cash's son. With Hobbs gone, Felicia, she walks through her apartment over to where she has Cash's son, Gus, in a cage. She has been applying the treatment, the cure, to Gus, the concoction that this Dr. Eric Pavel created. She injects it into little Gus, and we can see already that Gus is less bestial than he was previously. She must have been doing it since she got back from Romania. Gus, he's already looking a little bit more human, and part of the treatment requires exposure to sunlight, so Felicia picks up Gus and sits out on her apartment balcony, exposing him to the sun, and as she sits with him on her knee, she overlooks the busy streets of New York down below. And that is the end of Volume 3 Survival of the Fittest. Alright, that was the Survival of the Fittest story arc. I thought a really fun story arc. We have Nazis in this story, and Nazis are the best villains. They are so creepy. They have those scary outfits and the Nazi logos everywhere, and you just love to hate them. We have vampires in the mix, and we have a castle in Romania. That is all just a recipe for success. Mwah! But yeah, all that was really fun. I just want to talk about a few plot points, some of which maybe bothered me a little bit. So one thing is that this story is getting a little bit complicated and convoluted with all these different vampires and their rules. So Felicia, she's a half American vampire, so I guess she can sense other vampires, but she doesn't seem to fully transform into an American vampire. Whereas Gus McCogan, Cash's son, he's also sort of an American vampire, but because he was a baby and infected in the womb, it somehow affected him differently. Okay, I guess we gotta keep track of that. We have these ancient vampires, which have their own lore and their own deal, and somehow they all became these statues or something for thousands and thousands of years, even though they seem to be very powerful. For some reason, something made them go underground and become statues. I thought it was a little bit kind of funny and weird how they had this ancient Egyptian statue in this museum, and they're putting it basically in direct sunlight there, and through the glass, the sun is shining on the statue and messing it up. Why would you put a several thousand-year-old statue basically directly in the sun? Just move it out of the sun. That's the answer. You don't need to call in an expert to look at the statue. Just move it out of the sun. I thought another thing that was interesting was that when Cash, Felicia, and the doctor were trying to make their escape in the castle in Romania, they go through these secret tunnels which none of the Nazis should know about, and somehow the Nazis and the vampires managed to just sneak up on them out of nowhere. Somehow they got there without them realizing it. I wasn't buying into that. I did like Dr. Pavel's light gun, and they used that to kill some of these vampires. I thought that was really fun. I thought the concept of this vampire cure was interesting. We'll have to see how that gets used in future volumes. I felt a little bit of the storyline was a little bit confusing and convoluted at times, but nevertheless, I thought this story arc was really fun, and purely based on that castle in Romania and the Nazis and the vampires, I'm going to give this volume an 8 out of 10. Lots to like here. Thank you all for watching, and I will be back next week with Volume 4.